The Hunt for the Perfect Board Game. It sounds like a good title, right? Sounds like a good concept, a good subject to talk about. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and this is another Patreon voted video for my Patreon community where I occasionally put out ideas, or sometimes they put out ideas and those become videos, and this is about the hunt for the perfect board game. And the reason I wanted to do this topic, the reason I wanted to talk about this is for a few reasons. And the first is that if you watch my channel, by the very nature of focusing very heavily on Kickstarter games, ultimately often comes off as very cult of the new. And I wanted to both explore that. Why the cult of the new? Why all these new games? Why am I constantly playing and churning through so many games? As well as the fact that it's not necessarily as obviously cult of the new as all that. And to begin with, I want to point out that if I had stopped playing board games, if I had stopped playing new board games in 2015, then I would never have added Chaos in the Old World to my collection. And that's a big part of this video. The big part of this video is the first reason that I continue to play new games again and again and again, and I never stop, is because without that, I can pinpoint so many gems in my collection that would not be here today. My collection would not look the way it does today if I had stopped playing new games. And Chaos in the Old World, I think, I didn't go through everything, but I think this is my favorite game from 2015. And by the way, I actually just played it again last week for the first time in a few years. Amazing. Completely holds up. Love this game. It isn't going anywhere. But that's a big part of it. The concept that if you ever stop growing your collection, if you ever stop trying new experiences, then you're stuck in place. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. At the end of the day, if no new games came out ever again, if not a single new game came out ever again, we would have enough games to, well, at least I would have enough games to play everything as many times as I wanted. The sheer number of campaign games we have, the sheer number of epic experiences, you combine any number of these gigantic Seventh Continent, Gloomhaven, any of these games I have coming, Storm Sunder, Madara, who knows what. There's enough content out there to keep us going for a long time. But I also played Endless Winter, which is going to be out in 2021, and oh boy, I want that game in my collection. There's a balance here. There's a balance between appreciating what you have and trying new things. And it's a balance that I, for myself, focus on. My first rule, before we get into anything else, my first rule of board gaming is very simple. Do whatever is the most fun for you. As long as you're not doing self-damaging things and putting yourself in financial debt in order to buy board games, whatever. Don't damage or screw up your life. But past that, without the damaging part out of the way, do what's the most fun for you. That might be for you collecting 1 million games. It might be, I don't know. For me, it's not. For me, I like to be able to play the games I have. If I have too many games that I know that I just don't physically have the time to play them, then I don't appreciate them. I'm not a collector. I do like going all in, but I go all in on games I like, or I get rid of them if I don't like it enough to keep it all in. So the first rule, before anything else, technically the second rule, there's all these rules, I won't keep track, but the first rule there is do what is fun for you. If that means collecting games without playing them, that's fine. I could point to any number of joys. In fact, I have a video at some point talking about the nature of being involved in this hobby, even without playing games, can be immensely satisfying. So I understand it. I get it. If you like being involved in the community, if you like following Kickstarters, backing Kickstarters, and turning around and selling a Kickstarter, if you like stocking your shelves with games, whatever's fun for you, do that first and foremost. For myself, I like playing new games, I like playing old games, and I like the balance of the two. And what I mean by that is for you, for someone else, not for the person collecting games, for someone else, fun might just be continuously playing new games, never keeping them. I mean, take a look at a guy like Rado, who constantly talks about how he barely plays his old games. He consistently plays the new things, because that's what he does. That's his whole thing, is playing new games for publishers. And so you're stuck in this cycle of constantly playing the new, never being able to revisit those gems that you love. Now, to me, that's sad. That's horrible. The idea that I couldn't play Chaos in the Old World again, the idea that Endless Winter, which I just mentioned, I couldn't play it again because I've done my job and I've moved on, that sounds depressing to me. But again, for you, do what's fun for you. Do what's fun for yourself. And that might be playing new games. It might be collecting games and never playing them. It might be exclusively playing old games. And that's all fine. For me, it's a balance. And that brings me to the second thing I want to talk about, which is this idea that on the channel, you'll very much get this impression that I am all cult of the new. I am constantly getting into new things. I'm constantly churning through my collection. I'm constantly playing and backing Kickstarters and whatever. And it might seem like that. But I track my own stats. I track my own stats in terms of the games I play. I use BG Stats or BG Plays. I can't remember which one it's called. I think it's called BG Stats. But I use that app and I track my plays. And I do that for a variety of reasons. First of all, I find it gives me that little bit of additional incentive. I talked about this in a different video about how to play more games, about how I find having an app tracking my stats, setting challenges for myself, gives me that additional incentive to play a game when it's the end of a long day and I'm like, but I gotta get to 700 plays before the end of the year. It's ridiculous, it's crazy, but sometimes it's that little extra push you need to play a game when you're tired or not in the mood. And I never ever regret playing a game when I push myself to. Once I have that game set up, I've never sat there after a game and said, well, I wish I had sat in my bed and just played on my phone instead. I've never said that. It's something that you need to push to get out. And so one of the things I do in BG Stats is I track my new versus old plays, meaning how often am I playing a new game versus how often am I playing an old game. And my plays of older games is in the range of 80%. It depends on the day, it depends on the time, but I play roughly 80% of my plays are older games. Now, you don't necessarily see that on this channel a lot for a variety of reasons. First of all, when I have an afternoon where I play 5 games of Innis, I'm not going to talk about it to any large extent. You're not going to hear about it. You're not going to see it. You'll just hear once in a while that Innis is in my top games, because it is. But you won't necessarily hear about the 5 times I played Innis. Versus the new stuff I play, that is more likely to get reviews or talked about or something. Unfortunately, the nature of the algorithm, the nature of the community is that talking about or putting out content on older games will generally get you less of an audience than newer games. I'll still do it, don't get me wrong. I mean, I have a review coming up, or depending on when I put this video out, you probably just saw a review of Pipeline. You're going to see reviews of older games. Domination's behind me. You're going to see a review of that. You're going to see review of older content. You're going to see comparisons of older content on this channel for sure. But it won't be the focus, because I talk about Kickstarter. And Kickstarter, by its very definition, is all new. And so yes, I do make sure to play older games, but I still am always hunting for that newer game. And speaking of which, if I had stopped playing games in 2016, I would never have added El Grande to my collection. Let's see if we can organize these semi-nicely. Let's see, this is a little bit of too much of a glare here, but it is what it is. But yeah, El Grande. El Grande is an excellent game. Let's just hide this. El Grande is an excellent game that I added to my collection in 2016. And I have played this as recently as, I think 3 weeks ago I played this one. This one regularly hits the table roughly every 3 or 4 months. It's easy, it's light, it's accessible, plays in roughly an hour and a half, teaches in roughly 15-20 minutes. It is simultaneously enough strategy to be rewarding, while also not so much to be overwhelming. It's a good mid-weight game. It's a good next step game. In fact, I did a video on next step games, and now I'm realizing I probably should have included El Grande, because that totally should have made the cut there. And Chaos, by the way, I should do a review on Chaos. I need to get that to the table another time, but I should do a review on this one. This one holds up. Eric Lang, if you ever watch this video, please reprint Chaos. Do some sort of thing with it. I want more. I mean, some of the graphic design, some of the tokens meld in and blend in on the board. I think it could use an updated interface. I don't really care about the Warhammer license, so I just like the mechanics of this game, and I would love to see a new version. And if anyone says Blood Rage is a new version, Blood Rage is incredible, but it's not. It's not Chaos in the Old World. Speaking of Blood Rage, if I had stopped playing games in 2017, I would never have added Blood Rage to my collection either. And this is my #1 game of all time. And that's what's going on here. This hunt, this constant hunt for the perfect game, this constant premise that every year that goes by, I want to explore what else is out there. And when putting together these lists, part of what I did here is I sat there and found a game from every single year that I had added to my collection. And it was simultaneously amazing to see the games that have stayed in my collection. It was also equally fascinating to see the number of games that didn't. I had to go through lists and lists of stuff that I have acquired, and then I saw that for every 15, 20 titles I had gotten, only one of them was still around. Which makes sense, honestly. I get rid of most of my games. Some of them I get rid of right away. Many of them I get rid of right away. But I would say more of them kind of shift away over time. Something will enter my collection, and it'll stay for a few years. I'll play it, I'll enjoy it, and then I'll hit a breaking point where it no longer adds the same value it used to. A good example of that would be Captains of Industry. Captains of Industry was a game that I had added into my collection. I can't remember where. I think it might have been 2016 as well. And I liked that game, and I enjoyed that game, and I got 5-6 plays out of it over the course of 2 or 3 years, and every single one of those was an enjoyable experience. And then I didn't feel the need to play it anymore. To me, it got fired by Indonesia, by a Splotter game that did the same basic concept, but so much deeper than Captains of Industry, so much more rewarding than Captains of Industry. And that's a debate or a topic for another day, but that brings me to my second point, or my fourth point, or my 17th point. I don't keep track sometimes. Which is the idea that games don't necessarily have to stay forever to be valued. Sometimes the experience of playing a game is more than enough. It is rare, not never, but it is rare that I regret playing a game. Often we think of games as something that needs to be kept, that needs to be experienced. How can you go through so many games? Why aren't you enjoying what you have? Now, first of all, I am. We just talked about that. But secondly, past that, we don't have that premise with movies as much. We don't have that premise with books as much. Maybe books a little more. But sometimes we recognize that something is totally fine to be experienced once, and then you move on. Now, granted, with board games, it's a little more of an investment. You don't have to, read the rules for every movie you watch, but you do have to read the rules for every board game you play. And so there is more of an investment attached to a single play of a board game. But I'm fine with that, because I don't look at it as an investment in a single play. I look at it as an investment in something that may become a lifelong staple in my collection. It may last 2 or 3 years, or it may be a single play. And rules are okay. I'm fine with them. I don't love them, but I'm fine with them. I can deal with rules. But it is rare to me that when I play a board game, I sit there and say, well, that was half an hour of my life gone. Half an hour. That was 2 hours of my life gone. It's rare that I say that. It does happen. Once in a while, something is such an abysmal experience that I'm like, I can't believe we did that. Now, I do try to balance my playtime. I do try to sit there and make sure that for every time I'm trying something new and getting a solid 7 experience out of it, I try to make sure that the next week I try something that I love and I pull out a regular favorite to the table to ensure that I'm getting that balance of those highs of the games that I love versus the fun and experience and promise of something new. And if I had stopped playing games in 2018, I would not have added Innis to my collection. Innis, by the way, second favorite game of all time, possibly a contender for spot number 1. We'll see how that plays out. I highly recommend Innis. I've recommended Innis a bunch of times on this channel. I will continue to recommend Innis on this channel. It is my favorite of the Cyclades, Kemet, Innis trilogy from Matago, and I love this game. And if I had stopped playing games in 2018, it would not be in my collection. And that's what I mean when I say the hunt for the perfect game, because it is a hunt for the perfect game. I will never achieve it. There is no such thing as a perfect game, and I don't mean don't rate games a 10. I'm fine with rating games a 10. Anyone who says that, well, no game's ever a 10, well then that takes 10 off the rating scale, doesn't it? So that's a separate conversation, separate rant for another day. But I don't mean don't rate games a 10. A 10 can be a 10 while not being perfect. That is fine as well. I don't need the perfect game. But if you knocked my collection down to these 4, I'd have a pretty solid set of games right here. And these are all games that, had I theoretically stopped at any given point in time, they wouldn't be in my collection. And that's what's so interesting about this hunt, because you're constantly looking for something new. You're constantly finding new games. And then you have to figure out where it goes in your collection. Does it replace something else? Does it just get added to the shelf? Are you a collector? Do you find that are you fine with any number of games on your shelf? Are you fine with a certain number of games? How do you collect? How do you enjoy? And if I stopped playing games in 2019, Rurik would never have entered my collection. We got one more. We got one for 2020 as well. But 2019, Rurik would not have been added to my collection. And Rurik is another top 10 game for me. The game that is incredible. I've also talked about this one, and this is one that has slowly but surely, slowly it started to drop in my ratings, and then the expansion, which was on Kickstarter this year, got added, and, that expansion pushed it straight back into the top 10 for me. And again, right here is an incredible collection of games, and that is why I keep hunting for the perfect game. It's not that I'll ever find it. I understand that and recognize that, but I will frequently find something new. Every year that goes by, I find, it depends on the year, I'd have to look, but it depends on the year, but I'd find anywhere between 2 to sometimes as much as 10 games that I think of as keepers in my collection. Enjoyable experiences that the concept of not having those games baffles me. Games like Everdell, games like, any of these over here, games like Cyclades, like Kemet, anything in my top 20, anything in my top 50. There are so many experiences. Now, there are many that I'm fine with not loving quite as much. Margraves of Valeria is a game I added to my collection in 2019, and I really enjoy that game. But if it wasn't in my collection, I don't know if I'd miss it as much. I like it. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. But it doesn't have that staying power some of these have. Every single one of these games here, I don't know if or when it will ever leave my collection. And there are games in 2020, there are games in 2021, in 2022, 2023, 2024, every single year that goes by, there will be something new on the table, something new that I will sink my teeth into and go, that's why I play board games. And one of those games in 2020, there are a bunch, but one of those games is Super Fantasy Brawl, which I just put up a video on this past Saturday, or one of these Saturdays ago, and I talked about how this game is a reminder as to why I continuously back Kickstarters. Because Kickstarter or retail, for me, they both have that same problem. They both have that same issue of, I get a lot of games and I churn through them and I play them and I try them, and I if you watch my videos, my monthly videos, where every month I talk about the games leaving my collection, and every month there are games leaving my collection because I get so many games in, I try them, I enjoy the experience. Sometimes I don't even play them. Sometimes I try the rulebook, or over time, a year or two will go by, I'll lose interest and I'll realize it's time to move on from the promise that that game once offered. But then other times, I play a game like Super Fantasy Brawl, and I'm like, that was so much fun. I don't even think this is a good game in the realm of these others. In the realm of these games behind it, I don't think this compares in terms of being a quote-unquote good game. But good is a relative term, because good to me just means like, oh, it's a pinnacle of strategy and optimization and so and so and so and so, I don't know. In Super Fantasy Brawl, you may win the game, even though you may win the game through sheer luck. There is strategy, to be sure, I talk about this in my review, but at the end of the day, you might just draw the right hand, or your opponent might not draw the right hand, and you'll lose or win based on luck alone, and that is fine, because the game is fun. I love playing those cards, bashing into each other, accomplishing those objectives, accomplishing those challenges, and winning the game, and it just feels fun. And I'm happy to have this game in my collection. More than happy. Can't imagine is a hard word, but I am thrilled to have Super Fantasy Brawl in my collection. And like I said, this hunt will never end. It never is over, and I don't want it to be over. The journey is half as fun as the actual end game, and there is no end game because there's always another game. And in 2021, by the way, that game will, I already said this to a degree, but in 2021, that game will be Endless Winter. Endless Winter Paleo Americans, which I've put up a review on, and I put up a should you back it by the time you watch this video, and it's on Kickstarter right now. I'm pretty sure it's on Kickstarter. Sometimes I film these videos, I don't know exactly when they're going up, but based on when I think this video is going up, Endless Winter Paleo Americans should be on Kickstarter, and I recommend checking that one out. That one, to me, is an evergreen. And there's no such thing as an evergreen. There's no real concept as a game that will stay in my collection forever. There are games that I have had in my top 10 that have slowly moved on. But I think Endless Winter is here to stay for 5+ years. That game is so much fun to play. The experience it delivers is so satisfying. And the variability in the gameplay is so satisfying. It has deck building, it has worker placement. It is a richly rewarding experience that my only strike against it is it's a little too fiddly with the stuff going on the board, which for me, I don't mind because I love it so much. But that's the one complaint I could come up with. And in 2022, I don't know what's coming. And in 2023, I don't know what's coming. But what I do know is that I'm having fun with these conversations. And I hope you're along for the ride to find out with me which games become my staples in 2022 and onwards. I'd love to have you here. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Good luck with the hunt. It will never end. But I'm still going to keep finding, or looking, or something. I messed up that last word. It's all good. Until next time, have a good one.